How is everybody doing? And welcome back to another Strength Chat episode. And I'd like to welcome back a returning guest. Today, I would like to welcome back strength coach and co-founder of Jailhouse Strong. Today, I am joined by the one and only Josh Bryant. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. How you been?
I'm all good, thank you. Thanks a lot for taking the time to jump on. But I suppose the first question is, how are you? What's been kind of happening in your world recently?
I'm doing really well. Just been a pretty busy time because both my kids are playing football here. Football season just ended, so which little I'd say a little bit of downtime till January. Then in January I'm going to do Dubai, and then actually just nailed down a seminar in Amsterdam. So doing a lot of traveling here in the first part of the next
Ah,
year. Yeah, after the
ah,
holidays.
cool. How much traveling do you usually do? Because I know, especially coming over to Europe and those sorts of things. Do you try and get a couple each time, or how do you try and manage those seminars?
I try to do it actually the opposite, like as quick as I can usually. So
Right.
I'm generally not trying to make it into a vacation. If it's gonna be a vacation too, I would bring my family, would make a vacation out of it, and done that in like Australia before.
Oh,
But
nice.
generally, pretty quick. Like if I get to Amsterdam on Thursday evening, I'm leaving Sunday morning, kind of thing.
Oh, wow. Okay. Yeah.
It's like a long
Um,
weekend.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. I suppose with that as well, and this might be a little bit of a tangent, but does that kind of because especially for maybe younger coaches and trainers listening, it's kind of like how do they keep a routine and keep some structure? Does having a quick turnaround like that allow you to keep some form of routine? So if you're back Sunday, then you can start your routine from Monday again if you like.
Well, sort of. So yes and no. I think you just disrupt it less. So that's kind of the key right there is like then you can get back on track. So somewhere in there, you're gonna have to sacrifice a night of sleep. So I've made that mistake before of going somewhere, you arrive at like 8 in the morning, then I don't ever take naps, go there, take a 3 hour nap, then you're awake all night. So I would say the
Yeah.
best way to handle is get there, gut it out, go on their schedule as fast as you can, and realize you're gonna have like one night of not great sleep. Then probably when you come back, you're gonna get one night of not great sleep. But I mean, sports scientists used to say if you travel somewhere to compete, for every hour difference, you should get there a day ahead of time. So if you're going like 12 hours difference, I mean, by that theory, what 12 hours to get there, you're on a routine, then 12 hours to come back. You don't want to do that. So I would say if you're doing it quick, just realize it's going to disrupt the routine and get it over with as fast as possible. Or you need to draw it out, like a week or something could be kind of tough.
Yeah, I had actually heard that as well. I can't remember where I'd read that, but yeah, I did hear that, and
I
especially
see.
yeah,
I
if
never
you're
heard that. I heard the opposite. Like get on their routine, and I'm like, okay, that's like one of those textbook examples. But the real world, this has worked a lot better for me.
yeah,
I
definitely.
can't
I like
speak for
the
everybody else.
yeah, I like the phrase that you said there as well of trying to be the least disruptive as well, because anytime that there's other variables thrown in, obviously there's going to be disruption. But if you can cause as little disruption, I don't think anything's ever going to be perfect. But the least disruption you can have is good. That kind of goes on to obviously when I sent the topics over is some content that you've actually shared recently. This has come up in conversations with
Mhm.
clients, coaches, lifters, and when you're talking about, getting over there, getting it done, coming back, it's kind of, a type of being in the zone, if you like. And
Right.
I'd just like to try and for you to, in terms of lifting and strength training, what does kind of the concept of the zone mean to you? How would you define it? Because I think a lot of people think about, oh yeah, he at competitions or in training, yeah, she was really in the zone there. But I don't think people really understand like what that is, what elements are we looking at, if that kind of makes sense.
You're fully, basically, you're I'm kind of do this off the top of my head here because I didn't really wasn't able to take a bunch of notes or anything, but I can do this. So it means you're fully immersed in your activity that you're doing. That's your focus. You lose all sense of time and you're just fully immersed in it.
Yeah.
Like everything stops.
Yeah, and how does that look compared to does that come from experience? Does that come from just focusing on the lift at hand? Does it come from how you feeling in the warm ups? How does that kind of build up over time? How do people kind of get to that? How do lifters get to that point?
Well, the day of, that's a good question. So the day of, that would be very important to warm ups in football here, American football. What we say is you want to win the pre-snap. So what that means is before the game starts, your warm-ups look crisp, everything looks focused. Even the way the team would line up their helmets and things, like everything is focused and crisp, and you start right there. So powerlifting, strength sports can mean the exact same thing. You're focused on what you're doing, and you sort of win the pre-meet at that point. Like you have the most focus, the most intentional warm-ups, and all of that stuff's going to kind of set the tone. And as you get more advanced, you might be, this is an individual sport, not a team sport as much, so you have people helping you, but it's not a team sport in that sense.
Yeah,
As you get better at this and you do it more often, then you can find more individual strategies. For example, there are plenty of people that don't seem super focused in warm-ups, but they can flip that switch when they need to. But that's going to come with experience. So I would say you do what I'm saying here at first, and as you go and you get experience, you sort of morph it to what's going to work for you. So I would say it starts off with that, and it's also going to start off with your mental preparation ahead of time. Have you done mental rehearsals of what you're going to do? You should have. If you hadn't, it's going to be harder to get into the zone, things like that.
yeah,
And some people just more naturally get into the zone than others. So a lot of it's just your mental strategies, your self-talk all along. I think a lot of people get crazy focused, but then they end up doing worse in meets. It's like they're sort of a self-fulfilling prophecy of, they get so obsessed with it, they end up doing, worse. So there's that part of it too. So I would say your mental rehearsals, and then, just how you live your lifestyle, and then obviously setting the tone the day of.
yeah. And how does that differ? Because you've mentioned there about like in football, for example, setting the helmets up, setting the kit out, but also like kind of like your mental preparation. How can that differ between kind of like a beginner lifter, a beginner athlete, all the way up to somebody who's been doing it 5, 10 plus years? Do you think sometimes it's a case of learning those mental skills to rehearse it in your head, picture what the outcome's going to be, having that kind
Right.
of mindset of yes, I can do this? Or do you think for kind of like beginner or newer athletes, lifters, there needs to be some physical routine beforehand to help them get to that place?
That's a good point. Great point. So I think the physical, mental, spiritual is all tied into a degree. What's the old thing of like if you don't, if you're kind of off mentally, the best way to get on is to get in shape physically, sort of thing. So I think this all
Yeah,
ties in. So there's a huge component of if you physically do the right things, you're more likely to mentally do the right things. If you mentally do the right things, you're more likely to physically do the right things. So I would personally recommend doing sort of established, ways of talk about winning the pre-snap here, winning the warm-up ahead of time. And then as I said, as you go, so you go from like a general strategy of what's been shown to work for most people, try use that. Then as you go, you're going to discover your own individual nuances that you can apply from there. So start general, move specific, just like training. You could have your phase where you build your work capacity or limit strength, whatever. Then you go into more specific. The same here.
yeah. Do you
It
think
works like a
there's
funnel.
Yeah, and that's like 100% where my head was going, starting off
Yeah.
quite broad and then filtering down. I think sometimes, and I know I've been there where, I've competed on the same platform as more experienced athletes, lifters, and you're kind of looking at what they're doing. Do you think maybe the downside of trying to learn this and pick those elements is sometimes uh, lifters, athletes try and just copy exactly what other lifters that they see on social media, that they see at competitions,
Right.
and try and apply it to themselves, right? And try and copy it, kind of step for step, word for word, as opposed to trying to think about, all right, well, that lifter does this, that lifter does that. How does that apply to me? Do you think that's where sometimes people fall down and then struggle actually getting to that point because they're copying something that that athlete or lifter might have spent years and years refining to help them get to that point, and somebody's just copying it because they think, oh,
Right.
well, if they do it, I can do it, if that kind of makes sense.
It does make sense. So I would say the way to do that and draw experience from others is kind of the thing of like most people look what everybody does differently. So like, okay, like you do this, I do that, we're both successful. Like what gives, right? Do the
Yeah.
opposite. Look at success leaves clues. So if you look at everybody and say everybody seems to do that, like, you know, or nobody does this, like nobody's, having a full on steak dinner in the warm up area, probably shouldn't do that, or like every single person, starts off on, that's successful squatting with say the bar to warm up. So, and if you're going to go for an 800-pound squat, don't start it. Well, a textbook said,
Yeah.
50%, so that's 405. So you just walk in there and do that, not that either. So I think you have to look at like when you're figuring stuff out is success leaves clues. So look at what a lot of successful people do and find the commonalities because there's probably something there if every single person or a vast majority of people are doing it. But if one person just headbutts the bar before they squat to get blood everywhere and that person lifts a lot, that's great for that person. But what about the other 99%? So I think you have to look at like success leaves clues and draw it that way.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's a good to know because I think you can pick out and think, yeah, that's got to be that one person. Or I think sometimes people feel as though if only one person's doing it, that's kind of like the secret sauce to it. Whereas, yeah, that phrase of success leaves clues, the more people that are doing it, there's got to be a reason why they're doing it. Like what you said there, if people warm up with the empty bar, there's probably a reason why
Well,
they're doing it as opposed to doing
it's the
something
same thing in business,
ridiculous.
right? Because like if or anything, like you talk to some people and they're like, online or like whatever, they'll say like I build systems, routines, and you'll talk to somebody super successful and they're like, no, I just go off with gut instinct. And but you have to build that gut instinct. So you would start off with systems, routines, refine it, and then you're going to develop over time that gut instinct where you could be more, just do what you feel because you've programmed your mind to kind of evaluate situations correctly and go from there. Versus like if you've never competed before, you may not have an adequate gut instinct. It's different because you're not. Powerlifting's different because like at the end of the day someone's not gonna it's not MMA. You're not going to get beat up. You're technically not going against an opponent, so there shouldn't be anything when you really logically think about it that throws you off that bad, because if someone outlifts you, you're not getting your head kicked in. It's just they outlifted you. So there's that
Yeah.
part of it too. I think sometimes people think of it that way. It's a great way to lift more in a meet because you can draw off the inspiration and energy of others, and
Yeah.
there's no downside to it.
Yeah, definitely. And as well, I think because I've kind of been through this as well. Is you find out like what you said there about the person headbutting the bar. You kind of find out what doesn't work for you and what isn't going to help you get to that point of being in the zone. Because I think sometimes it's a case of you can try doing something, but if you're not really feeling it, if you're not really getting feeling any benefit from it, it's kind of like it's just a waste of time. So I think often realizing or learning that this isn't for you can also be a positive as well. Would you kind of agree with that?
Right. Yeah, absolutely. And I think there's also like you have to look at like at the meet and things like not changing things, to stay in your zone and all that, especially when you're starting out, not changing things up. So like for example, if you eat like some crap from McDonald's for breakfast every single day, you don't want to go to like chicken and wild rice the day before the meet. Just do what you've been doing because you don't want to totally throw. And I know this is like sort of semi getting off subject, but there's an article I read. It was sort of funny. It was that precision nutrition guy and was working with Dave Tate. Like this has got to be like over 20 years ago. And so Dave Tate was like, he was way bloated up and all this, and he wanted to, and I think he got a blood test, his cholesterol, all that stuff was super high, and he wanted to, get leaner and get healthier. So I guess he called the precision nutrition guy and said, I want to do this. Said there's only one problem: I can't eat clean. The guy's like, what? He's like, because he said he went through his diet. He goes to McDonald's every morning, basically just fast food drive-throughs, like pastry, just all throughout the day, and then crashes from energy, ton of stimulants to get yourself back up, that sort of thing. And
Yeah.
so every time he would abruptly try to change it, okay, I'm going from like the worst possible to like bodybuilding perfect, he would get sick. So you
Yeah.
don't know how to react. So you can't be like just changing your diet last minute. You can't be, changing your supplements like that. Like if you don't ever, if you've never tried it, yeah, could you take a pre-workout and lift more? Probably. But if you hadn't tried it, there are paradoxical reactions and things of people that you don't know, okay, maybe it does help you, but maybe you don't know how hard you crash and all that. So you can't change all that stuff. You need to do your work to get in the zone ahead of time. It's going to be sometimes in these sports, it's, cold, lonely, dark, boring, mundane, and that's
Yeah.
just the way it is. And you don't need to add a novelty the last 3 or 4 days. You kind of got to run with what you brung at that point, and you need to be doing those mental strategies ahead of time.
Yeah, absolutely. When you said there about, a drastic change, I remember having a chat with another coach, and it was on the topic of eating different things, and he used the phrase of if you eat weird things are going to happen, and we applied it to that same thing of whether it be in training, nutrition, anything like
Mhm.
that. If you make a drastic change, something drastic is probably going to happen. Not always
Yes.
positive, but something's going to have. Whereas, like what you're saying, um, having that kind of like consistency, even it is kind of mundane, just making sure that it's having that consistency from there. You mentioned there, obviously, we've chatted about not changing things too much, but how does the role of the coach impact somebody's zone or how they feel going into a meet or a session? Is that more influenced in terms of how they're speaking to them, how they're setting up the session, or could it be like a programming side of things? What's kind of the role or the influence of a coach in that
Well, I
situation?
think it's one of two, right? It's either going to empower somebody or disempower somebody depending who the person is. I mean, you have some coaches, in any sport where you run through a brick wall for that person, and you want to, they just every time you see that person, you can perform better. And other ones, they may be smart technically, but they can kind of like suck the life out of you.
Yeah,
So it could be just a presence. It could be like an actual, like, all right, do this 15, 20 minutes a day, whatever. But I think it's a case by case basis. I do think either way, it's a powerful force. So it could be a powerful force for darkness, for lack of a better term, or to empower you to the next level. So I think absolutely both. There's
yeah.
power there.
Yeah, and with that, how does what's kind of your approach with that? Because I know sometimes, yes, we want to empower the athlete or the lifter. It might have a negative effect. How can you when we've spoken about systems there? How can you kind of adapt your coaching to make sure that you're then getting that lifter, getting that athlete to that point?
Well, I think first off, you have to actually take care of what you should be taking care of. So, you know, consistency and adherence is king. So if that's not happening already, you're going to have to pull something out of your ass. So like that's not something you want to have to do very often. So if that doesn't take care of it, if that's not taken care of, I think you have to like, keep like basically I always say like this, you know, there's like the law of use and disuse. The exercise, it's not, I always tell somebody, this is not me liking you or not liking you, but if you're not consistent, and you're getting intermediate to advanced, the gains, the adaptations, the gains are not going to be there. There's nothing I can do about it. So that doesn't matter. Like if you are literally, helping hungry kids, or you're in Vegas on, having a cocaine binge and getting hookers, you're not training. You're not training, right? It
Yeah.
doesn't matter that one is noble and one is, bad. It does matter. Like in the Bible, it says it rains on the just and the unjust, meaning
Yeah.
like, good things can happen to bad people, vice versa. So it doesn't matter if you don't train, you don't gain. If you don't do that, there's not really a mental strategy in place at that point. And even at that point, if you don't tell the person, you're kind of doing them a disservice. If you say like, all right, well, you know, you haven't done what you're supposed to do for the last 6 months, but now all of a sudden, if you do mental rehearsals for 10 minutes a day, you're somehow going to overcome all of that. You're not,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
because if somebody's that like unserious and that uncommitted already, yes, there's plenty of examples of mental rehearsals, without like people, like there's studies on, I don't know if studies, experiments would be the right word. 'Cause I don't know, like to me, a study would be like a wide variety of people versus an experiment smaller, I guess. But on like pianists and things like that, of like if they're once they know how to play the piano, if they do mental rehearsals, of how exactly what keys to hit and all that stuff. Same with golf. Even with there was one with free throws, even of like basically if you mentally rehearse that on those fine motor skills, that you're going to actually get a lot of the benefit you would if you actually practice them. Now, obviously, the best is doing it and mentally rehearsing it. Strength, though, the mental rehearsal is huge, but it is not quite as complex of a motor skill. Like a lot of this is an equation of brute strength. You have the exception of Olympic lifting. That's essentially like gymnastics with a barbell in your hand, but like a conventional deadlift or something with a semi-rounded back is not like a real high skilled movement. That's an equation of brute strength. So
Yeah.
that too.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's that thing of I like what you said there about, you can spend 10 minutes doing mental thinking about things. But it doesn't matter if you're not doing the work. And a phrase that I like to think about is you've got to maximize what you're doing first before you start optimizing. Whereas I think people look at optimizing
Say it again.
everything. So it's
What's the
trying
expression
to
again?
so
What's the
you want
expression you
to
said?
maximize what you're doing, maximize your output rather than um, trying to optimize everything because then that way the actual work that you're doing, I think people can get a lot more out of or put in a lot more effort in terms of what they're doing, rather than trying to think about, oh, I need to do those mental skills straight away. I need to do that. I need to do that. So I think, yeah, people can
Yeah,
put
very
that
few
more.
people are the point of like true optimization. If they can just get consistency and maximize, what's right in front of them. That was that's one of the first principles in Jailhouse Strong was you want to do the best you can with what you have. I mean, right there and
Yeah,
right there before you optimize anything. So your self image is your mental portrait of yourself, like that, and that's in your subconscious mind makes it a point to that like to you have to remain consistent with your self image. You do not. No one, even the worst people in the world, don't view themselves as bad or a liar. So if
yeah,
you're telling yourself like you've been inconsistent, you haven't done anything consistently for a year, then you're gonna do a powerlifting meet anyways because you're supposed to be training 4 days a week. You do 2.5 on average or something. Your subconscious mind knows that you can't overcome that with just a mental rehearsal. It would view yourself as a liar and it would sabotage the performance more than likely. So that's what I'm saying. You can't out mentally rehearse a lack of physical preparation in this regard. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah, yeah,
so you could
definitely.
like, I mean, if you're gonna do the meet anyways, I mean, yeah, you could like mentally rehearse the week of like how the technique and all that should be. And it would be better than not doing it at all. But if you told yourself, I'm adequately prepared, I'm committed, all this, your subconscious mind knows you're lying to yourself and you're going to sabotage. That's why a lot of people sabotage themselves. That's why self-talk is so important, because your subconscious mind it just takes it at face value. It doesn't look at, is this true? Is this false? It looks at like, It's basically working for you, what you tell it, what it believes, it acts in accordance with.
Yeah, definitely, and as well, because I think that's an interesting point. And when you're talking about there about the optimizing anything,
Mhm.
you're talking about people that have trained or competed for a long time, and it's 1 to 2%. That's why I can't remember the conversation that I had, but that's why world records are only beaten by a small amount rather than a huge amount because it's those small little details that add on top of all of the work that they've put in, which kind of flows nicely into kind of the second topic that I wanted to touch on is,
I'd say
especially
one
when
more
we
thing on
talk.
this is
Yeah, of course, yeah,
that there's a movie there's a movie here called, have you seen it, called Any Given Sunday, about football?
yes, I have seen
Just
that. Great for
yeah,
that speech with Al
just
Pacino, awesome.
in the inches, yeah. Just anybody watching this, go on YouTube, look up Any Given Sunday plus inches, you'll find it. And that's exactly what we're talking to, is like football life comes down to a game of inches. If you can just get like, I had a football coach one time say that like basically all the work we're doing, like he gave examples of, we had a losing season and we had a winning season, but like the examples were all this we're doing right now. He didn't say that, it was before that was made, I think, but it was basically like, that's the difference in a first down here and there. And it was true. Like all those games, we lost by a touchdown or two. We ended up winning by a touchdown. It wasn't like, it was so much work to get. That's why you have to talk to people if they're serious about this and actually want to commit to it, because it is a lot of work to go from, once you're strong, to go to ultra strong. So like once you get strong, say you're benching 400 pounds and you're not real old or anything, you probably maintain that lift without doing a ton for a long time. And that if that's what you want and that's good enough for you, like no judgment here, that's great. But like to go to 500, it's going to require so much more time, effort, precision, doing everything right. That, is this worth it to you? Is it worth it for those inches? Is it worth it to like, you know, miss, social gatherings, not drink when other people are, go to bed on time, be the weird one at a family holiday where you're bringing like your own food, all that shit. Is it worth it to you? I don't know.
Yeah,
You got to answer that question. I mean,
yeah. Yeah, no, I think I'm really glad you mentioned that film. That is, yeah, I'm a big fan of that film, and I think that speech is like, yes, all right, it's a made up film, but yeah, you can take a lot out of that speech, and just realize that the like what you were saying, the mundane stuff, the small things that you're going to do, and doing them over and over again is yeah, like what it says in the speech, that difference between winning and losing, it's literally on a knife edge. And that the second topic that I wanted to touch on is actually about work capacity,
mhm,
putting the work in. And I think sometimes again, this is a topic or a phrase that gets
right.
actually thrown around quite a lot, but not necessarily explained, and how that can actually impact performance. So yeah, do you just kind of want to give
Sure.
your take on work capacity?
Okay, so it's your work capacity, be your ability to do work, recover from it, and adapt to that work that you've already done. So you're able to do the adequate training stimulus and subsequently adapt from it. I think would be a good sort of, if there's a real definition, that'd be close enough, right? So
Yeah,
what it's going to measure is like basically again like how much work you can do in a session. Um, I will take back how many reps you can do, how many sets you can do, how well you can recover between sets, how many sessions you can do and recover to between all of that without falling apart is the key. Okay, so that's a huge baseline. You know what I mean? So the key, it's basically how it's basically, so the way you're going to build it is you want to build it over time without totally stressing your CNS, your joints, things like that. Because obviously if you could, just literally maxed out every day on say deadlift, like got psyched up and everything else, and you didn't get hurt and you're able to do it, you probably would improve your work capacity. But that's not like a real logical way to do it. So why it matters to people. You have faster recovery, whether that's within the session, like, between sets or between sessions. That's huge, because over time you can do more work and subsequently get stronger, more well conditioned, or anything you want. You're gonna have more tolerance to volume. Period. You're gonna be
Yeah.
able to recover from volume, tolerate it better with a higher work capacity. What a lot of people don't think of is your technique is gonna hold under fatigue. So when you get tired, you know what? It's gonna be a good spot if you're like you're doing some high volume bodybuilding squat workout, and you, like Tom Platz, you literally just go to failure. You just miss in position in the squat. It's not like you're doing a good morning or anything else. You miss in position, you're able to dump it, get spotted, whatever. But that you're holding your technique under fatigue, I think that is huge. It's going to allow for better tapering. So whatever you're doing, you can taper more adequately. For example, in a powerlifting meet, talk about if you're inconsistent, you kind of need that stimuli longer to actually maximize it. So you hadn't been doing what you're going to do for a year. You decide to do a powerlifting meet in 5 weeks. Yet you can't taper for 3 or 4 weeks. You can't do your last heavy deadlift 3 weeks out because you only have 5 weeks to train for it. But if you have that residual, volume base, you can taper, or the work capacity, you can taper that way. And you look at even like bodybuilders and stuff, a lot of the guys that train, higher volume, when they get out of bodybuilding and their physique's going to hold longer without that, where somebody didn't do very much work, they don't really hold their physique as long after if they stop. So I think there's that part. You're going to have a lower injury risk period, a higher work capacity. Kind of comes back to fatigue, the technique breaking down, but just overall resiliency. I mean, even if like you're doing, go to football, for example, rugby, whatever, if you're just, if you have a higher work capacity, you can tolerate more. You take a tackle, a hard tackle the wrong way or whatever, you're more likely to get up and be able to keep going. And if you can't, you're going to recover faster from that. You have a more efficient, energy use. Okay. You have a stronger base for more like sport specific work. So that doesn't have to be just powerlifting or strongman or whatever, bodybuilding. It could be any of these, ball sports that we were talking about. You're able to handle workload increases, better like in your sport. So like if you come into football or rugby at the beginning and you have a higher work capacity, as the coach increases the training volume or intensity, you're just going to be able to handle it better. You're not going to be wiped out from the first practice and sore for 10 days after. Another one you got to think about this, they all tie in together, stronger repeated efforts.
Yeah.
So like you look at, like, again, let's go back to, I don't know who knows, I just involved with football here, so that's why I keep using as an example, but
Yeah.
it's especially true in football because you stop, you start, you stop, you start, you stop, you start. Okay. So let's just say you could run a 4.5 40, which is fast. But if you do that, an Olympic sprinter could probably run, a 4.2 40. But can they do that over and over again? So if you can go like a 4.6 or 4.7, 20 times in a row versus a 4.2 once, I mean, who's more effective? So that's a huge thing that could be applied to any sport, right? So and then you just sharper mindset when you're tired. When you have a higher work capacity, what do they say? Vince Lombardi, fatigue makes coward of men. I would say not only does fatigue make cowards of men, it makes people making stupid decisions too. So even
Yeah.
if you don't become a coward, you're going to make stupid decisions when you're tired. I mean, everybody does. Like, I mean, that's why, I mean, some people have even claimed, in wartime, if you deprive people of sleep, it should be classified as torture, for example.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, you know what I mean? So like, so if there's people are saying that with a straight face, there must be something to this of like, you're just making, the reason they think that is because you're going to be making poor decisions under fatigue. So they can convince you to say or do anything is why that's the case,
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
there's that part
Absolutely.
too. So
Yeah.
there's so many reasons. So, how do there's so many different ways to build it. Obviously with your training, of course you can, but then I think you start, like, anything is progressive overload. Okay. So whether that's getting stronger or building your work capacity, I think the key difference we're talking about here, if it's a long-term process, is you're not trying, like, so say for example, most people would be familiar with like I'm assuming that 531 or something. Who
Yeah,
would
yeah,
listen to this? Would they not?
yeah,
Okay. So you go on like do the last set, you do like an AMRAP, you do as many reps as you can on that weight, right? So you're not, this is not that necessarily. So you're not, it's a progressive overload. You're slowly ramping up the gradient of volume or intensity over time. So it's like the example I use a lot of times is rucking.
yeah,
If you are rucking, say, for an out, like you're doing an out, let's just say, and another one's in density, how much work you can get done in a period of time. The more work you can get done in a period of time, it's denser. Okay. So like let's look at that. So like let's say you decide to start rucking. You ruck with 45 pounds. Okay. And now you do that for an hour. You do that twice a week for an hour for a year straight. And you're going off your heart rate. So your heart rate cannot go above 140, cannot drop below 120 once you get working. Okay. You track how far you go. There's a lot of people that you think are in pretty decent shape in an hour that won't hit 3 miles. But
yeah,
if they keep going and going and going, I did that for like, it was amazing of how much further you just start going and you don't feel one iota of pain. That is building work capacity without really knowing it. Because I have this guideline. You don't have to get fancy with trackers or anything. So if you talk to somebody, you can talk to them. You're not having a full on conversation like this. You're not, it's just like you can talk a little bit to somebody, right? And like you just lose
yeah,
your breath a little bit. If you're at that pace all the time and you do that for an hour, just try anybody listening, try this. Pick a weight, say 10 to 20% of your body weight. Go for any set amount of time, like 20 minutes to an hour. And just pick a heart. Doesn't matter. Again, this doesn't matter what the zone is. Just pick one. It could be, I'd say 120, 140. Pretty good example for most people that you're not gonna induce subsequent fatigue that's gonna, take away from the rest of your workout. Because here's the idea here. If we can do this without creating more fatigue, in theory, actually facilitating recovery, that's where the winning's happening. So yes, you could absolutely go out and do like a bunch of shuttle runs, death sprints, puke and all that. And you're getting you're certainly getting something out of that if you do it consistently, but we can do this pretty painlessly. We're like, you're really pleased with the result. And that's what it is. It's like, I'll prescribe rucking in these heart rate zones. And then people just keep getting better and better and better. Like this one guy, was, 50 pounds. You literally emailed me yesterday about hit 4 miles an hour. But before that, so he was like, before that, like 2.2 miles, like, 6 months ago, but nothing was painful. And I think that's where like, even like the military and stuff a lot of times goes wrong is that a lot of times, like with running and stuff, there's certain times they got to hit and all that, but there's no progression to how they do this. Like, all right, we're going to throw in a ruck and like, ruck for 2 hours today and people are like dead versus like, if you do what I'm saying here, you can do it pretty painlessly and it doesn't take away because if this is done right, the extra work is neutral or even slight regeneration of the previous work you've done for the more intense stuff. So that's how you're going to build a lot of this is, and that's we got to be careful of it. It becomes a lot of people in these strength sports are so gung ho that they want to just keep adding, adding, adding. Well, you know what? I did the sled drags for recovery, but now like it's becoming where I can barely move the sled and I'm screaming, psyching up, and then that becomes an additional leg day, if you will, where
yeah,
versus like a way to facilitate recovery. So I think that is the kind of key to it is finding these zones and then just gradually increasing like, density and doing so painlessly. If that's like the right word I'm trying to use the easy word here, but that would be the right word. If not, there's no additional stress if done right. You know what I mean? Like it's
yeah.
just kind of like the same thing.
Yeah, definitely. I thought that was a good explanation because especially with like the sprinter, yes, really fast over 100 meters, but they won't be able to do that again for, maybe not until the next day or the day afterwards. Whereas, especially when it comes to, strength sports, being able to do those
Mm-hmm.
repeated efforts. And yeah, interesting you said there about, the sled
Well,
as
I
well,
mean,
because yeah.
yeah. So, yeah, I don't think using another example here on that. I don't know. the extent of the knowledge of people listening with like firearms, guns, and legality and all that. I don't think there's, I know they're not as prevalent, but this would be a good example. So you heard of the AK-47?
Yeah, yeah,
Okay, that's like one of the most universally used guns, right? So you go to like Vietnam or somewhere. When America started going to like the more AR style rifles, which are more precision and that kind of thing, they get in the mud or something, don't shoot anymore. Where like you can find AK-47s, like in Saudi Arabia or Kuwait or somewhere, buried under sand for 30 years, pick it up and start firing it. So it may not be quite as precision accurate, but that son of a bitch is going to shoot forever, and you can throw it in whatever you want and it will keep shooting. So that's the way I look at the training. It is a lot of times like sprinting, powerlifting, all that is more of a precision rifle sport, where what I'm personally training for is more AK-47. I want to be, you know, deadly over and over and over again. I understand that I'm giving away something to get there. Like, could I be a little bit faster? Could I be a little bit stronger if I just solely focus on that quality? 100%. But if you can build that work capacity, you're the AK-47, throwing the sand, throwing the dirt, you're going to keep on. And that's like even in football, like the old school mentality of like a lot of these running backs and fullbacks, they carry the ball 30 times a game. People don't do that anymore. And they just keep on coming versus like, that conditioning of like, you may not be quite as fast, but you're able to do it over and over and over. So if you get away from that, what I call that, and again, not powerlifting, but like these other sports we're talking about, is what you call artificial strength base. Like, yes, you can bulk up and get strong as hell, you know, and but if you don't have the requisite conditioning to go with it, that's an artificial strength base. So once you have to reintroduce the conditioning to get ready for whatever sport you're playing, rugby, whatever, your strength's going to drop again. That's an artificial strength base. So you like essentially, elevated your ceiling, but then somewhere else you kind of crash into the basement, and that's not what we're
yeah,
after. We want to keep, even if it's like a sport like that where you do have a strength building phase, you do have a size building phase, you can't completely let everything else go to hell. You have to keep some requisite of work capacity, or it's an artificial strength base that doesn't really tell us very much.
yeah. I think it's kind of that thing of you always want kind of like a baseline of where you're at, and yes, things can go up and down depending
Right.
on what you want to do, what you want to get in involved with. But I suppose that
That's one
also
thing that a lot
ties.
of military units do smart is like you do like a PT test kind of
Yeah,
unannounced. So like,
yeah,
look, you may not max, if we're going to train for it, we're going to max it, right? But you need to hit these standards if I just call you up, like, right? So like I do that with like, hey, you need to be able to do this, and as long as you can do that as a baseline, that's something to build on. Like I talk about, this kind of training is another way I look at it is, I use the AK-47. Another way to look at it is the 12-week analogy. I can be ready for a strength competition in 12 weeks, so I solely focus on that and do really well. I can be, ready for some sort of conditioning, like, whether it's like a long ruck or whatever, 5K, or you'd be ready to maximize your speed. So you got that like the 8 to 12 week window where if you solely focus on that, you can be lights out in it, but you're at a pretty high level already. So it wouldn't take very long. Where if you took like a high level powerlifter that does not do any conditioning and said like, hey, you know what, you're gonna have to do a 5K in like 8 weeks from now. No matter what they did, it probably wouldn't be a really great result at that point, right? It's going to take a
yeah,
long time to get to a respectable level,
yeah,
and that's
definitely.
fine if that's your soul. I mean, it's funny because like um, Tom Havlin and I were talking about this last week about it was kind of like in a way it was kind of cool in like a lot of these sports when people just like didn't give a shit, and like I remember one guy was like needed like oxygen to walk, literally needed oxygen to walk a block, but he was so strong on an overhead press. It was kind of like in a weird way cool and kind
Yeah,
of endearing in a way, but like that's not what I personally want. But I do kind of, I do respect that for sure. I do respect 100% people are willing to give it all up for like a one, singular goal or focus. And I've been there before. I've done that before, and I liked it at
yeah,
the time, but that's not where I'm at now. And
yeah,
that's not where most people are at now. So when I work with people, I'm not here to make any kind of judgment. If you want to do something that I would view as harmful, I would tell you I think it's harmful. But then if you're like, well, I'm a grown up, I'm gonna do it anyways. Okay, cool. Like I'll
yeah,
at that point to it, within reason, but like not if it's too crazy, but like if if people want to do something like that, think you should have to let them know, like, hey, you know what? I'm gonna, bulk up to, 420 pounds and I'm 5'6". Okay, like, hey, look, dude, this is not like probably the healthiest thing, but you're
Yeah.
at the same time you're grown up if you want to do it. Okay.
Yeah, I think as well it ties into, using the AK example, it allows you to have that longevity and, rather than kind of being a flash in the pan, if you like,
Right.
just focusing on one thing and then dropping back off.
I mean, yeah, because you look at let's go back to the sprinter example. We've already used this. Is like a lot of them are always like dealing around, Achilles, hamstrings, things like that. So you look at a lot of high level sprinters. Is a lot of people are in weenies because they're like dropping out of races and stuff all the time. That has nothing to do with that at all.
Yeah,
It has to do with, okay, sprinting, powerlifting. A lot of these sports, if you're not at 100%, you're totally ineffective. So if you were a sprinter and you were at, like at 10 flat, you're not like one of the best in the world, but you're a really good sprinter. At 11 seconds, you're more of 100 meters, you're more of like a high school sprinter. Big
yeah,
difference. That's 10%. Where in football, particularly the positions like line and stuff, if you're willing to gut it out and you're tough, at 90%, you're more effective than somebody not as good a lot of times. You know what I mean? Like, so if I'm like the best in the league, I'm at 90%, I'm better than you if you're mediocre still.
yeah,
It's a little less precision, a little more. So, but I think when you train for singularly for one focus, it also can cause a lot of problems. Like, so not only does it make you ineffective in a lot of other, it makes you ineffective in a lot of others. So a lot of these people are dealing with more injuries because, like, when you're pushing to some of that extreme, like again for sprinting, we're using that example, or lifting, either one. If you stop, like, think about if you're like squatting, right? If your max is 500 pounds, right? So if you're going for 450 for like your normal lifter, like you can get like 3 or 4 reps at 90%. You go for 3 to 4 reps at 450. Okay. That's like a gut buster's hard. Drop that to like 410. It's not gonna be very hard, right? It's like
yeah,
that 10% drops huge. Like in sprinting, like you could, if you go like 90, like if you have like pretty good tissue tolerance and you don't have any like major dysfunctions going on, a lot of people can just jump up at 90% and just sprint without warming up or anything. Not that that's recommended, but they can, nothing happens. Where if you
yeah,
do that 100%, then it would be a huge difference. That 5 to 10% can make, so that's the thing, is a lot of times when you start competing in something, that's when like you take it. I don't know what it is. If it's just the extreme, I think it's both. Like the physical extremes you're pushing your body to be, that singular focus. But I also think there's like a shift in mentality
yeah,
too. You know what
yeah,
I mean? Because it's like
yeah,
funny. I used to go to this gym, and this guy, this old school bodybuilder, always talk about like when people would, if people start taking drugs, how it help them. Obviously, it helped them. They wouldn't do it, right? But he said it was not only just like the physiological side effects, because they've had studies that like on that where people have been like given placebo, like Dianabol and stuff, and they actually
yeah,
make, it's not as good as the real thing, but they actually make gains too because they think they're on it. So he said there's sort of like this shift in the mentality of like, someone goes in the parking lot, locker room, buys it off some other guy, in their mindset of like, this is now illegal. So I'm not only like, I'm going to the next level because I'm willing to like sacrifice going to jail to do something illegal to make gains. And he said that would make them stronger just because they were like, in their mind, they convinced themselves they're doing something that other people won't do. Because
yeah,
back then, especially like now, it didn't seem as big of a deal as it was. But back then, it was like they were actually like prosecuting people for it and stuff. So it's like, okay,
yeah,
I can do something illegal here. I'm kind of like going next level here. So I'm going to make gains. Then he said, well, then on top of that, like if I'm actually risking my, freedom for this, I'm not going to be out drinking. I'm going to get my diet and all that crap tightened up because it's not like I'm just like going to the store and buying this and, looking for a little extra gains. I'm literally risking my freedom here. So I think he was
yeah.
saying like, that shift in mindset played a role for people too.
Yeah,
And I
it's
think we
amazing,
just,
really how. Yeah, it's amazing, really how the mind can impact that.
it can.
Um,
It's just like the competitive. That's what I'm saying. I don't think it's just like I'm squatting with 450 instead of 410, so I get hurt easier because I think there's something the mindset. I'm putting it on the line. I'm going to a competition. I'm doing something other people won't do, and that's good to get better gains. but it's also good to get injured easy. You know,
Yeah, yeah. And
so it's like when I train, like I train my hardest, but I don't psych up.
yeah,
You know what I mean? I don't psych up. Like if I do, it's rare. And I did that before, really hard with this huge sandbag before I went to Australia and to do a seminar. And I literally remember on that plane ride, I took my mind to where I hadn't been in a long time. I just felt like drained for a couple of days. Like it was like, yeah,
yeah,
I can definitely do this, but it's different than usually. Like that's the other thing is like training like this is you're kind of focusing on feeling good and being effective most of the time. So you're not like there if you're bodybuilding, powerlifting, things like that. Like it's almost like a badge of honor if you can't if you're like, why are you walking funny? Oh, I hit legs. Like that's pretty badass, right? You kind of feel good about yourself.
yeah,
Where if you're training to be effective in the real world, not on the stage or on the platform, you don't want to be to the point where you can't walk for 5 days
yeah,
because you're ineffective at everything else you want to do.
yeah. And quite a lot of topics and information and tangents in there. And,
See, I like these
um,
better like this when we kind of like don't have
yeah,
any plan and just go like this.
absolutely. That's why I stuck with the name Strength Chat. But the last question from what we've said about there, and there's been some really really good points there. But for everyone listening, whether it's the coaches listening or the lifters or the athletes listening,
Mhm.
what would you say are your kind of like take home points or words of wisdom from everything that we've chatted about there today?
Yeah, I would say like basically a lot of this is comes down to intention. Intention is everything here, and that's what I think we got to. Why are you doing this? What do you want to get out of it? So I think like whether it comes back to getting in the zone, building your work capacity, what is your purpose for training, and then from there you can kind of like where there's a will, there's a way. Point being, you have the intention, you have the will, then take action from there. So I think that's what a lot of it comes down to is like there's a lot of purposelessness online. If you think about it, why is somebody doing this? Okay, well, like so you have to look at when people are doing stuff that's good or bad, smart or dumb online. I think a lot of people think they're gonna like copy that person, and I don't know
Yeah.
if they think they're actually getting gains or it's just like the gimmick's gonna pay off. Like if like like for example, I don't watch this, but I saw it one time. It's like the dude perfect dude on YouTube. They just do like weird trick basketball shots. You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
I've seen other people, like kids around here, want to copy it. They want to do their own trick shots. Like, dude, that gimmick is played out. Like, you missed that one. Like, that's not gonna work for you. So, like, if you're trying to go viral online, you're not going to be a better version of somebody else. You're gonna have to come up with, something totally different at that point. Like,
Yeah.
so I think like people might live in a fantasy world that like they're gonna kind of like take somebody else's gimmick and make it a lot better. But for everybody doing like stupid shit on YouTube or Instagram that's made it big, there's probably 100 people, you know, with one subscriber in their mom's basement that like, hasn't made it big.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
living a disaster. So I think you got to keep that in mind. So why are you doing this? If you're doing it just to go viral online, fine. But then you need to find your own gimmick and find something good. You're training to get stronger for a powerlifting meet. You're training for bodybuilding, for rugby, whatever you're doing. You have to figure out why, then kind of lay out a path there. So I think a lot of this comes down to a lack of purpose and a lack of intention.
Yeah, yeah, I think that's a good point. Understanding your why is key because then it keeps that focus and keeps you working towards it.
Well,
Um,
even deeper on that is like the why of like the way you're saying it right there. I don't know what you mean, but you're probably meaning like what you're training for powerlifting, right? Like, okay,
yeah,
yeah, of course, or whatever. Absolutely, that's true. But then go deeper into it. Like,
mm,
okay, the bench press, I am working to move the barbell from point A to point B, perfect technique, as explosively as possible. Cool. Okay. But now I'm hitting cable flies. So I'm not trying to swing the cable like a madman. I want to feel every fiber in my chest contract. You know what I mean? So why are you doing this? Okay. I'm doing that to build the movement. I'm doing this to build and tax the muscle in isolation as much as possible. And that sort of thing, why am I rucking? Am I rucking just to see how fast I go? I've overdone that before too. Like I told you about the buildup I had that was successful.
yeah,
I've also pushed it too hard too. of like adding a ton of weight and actually got really good at it. But it was like, okay, now my ankles hurt. They've never hurt before. So like, yes, I can keep doing this and push through it and be a tough guy. But is this why I'm doing it? I'm doing it. Am I doing it to just like set a record in rucking, or am I doing this to for overall, physical resilience and preparation? Well, it's for that reason. And so, yes, I can push it, and maybe it's not a bad idea once in a while to see what you're made of and test yourself a bit. But that's different than doing it week in, week out. Like, okay, I'm gonna do a 15-mile ruck with a heavier weight, fast as I can. Cool. But that doesn't need to be like a weekly occurrence. That's like, quarterly or, you know, every 6 months, whatever, kind of thing.
Yeah, definitely. And with that as well, diving a little bit deeper, why you're
Mhm.
doing something, it allows you, like I say, to keep going with that. Thanks a lot, Josh, for taking the time
Yes.
to jump on again. For everyone listening who might have any questions about what we've chatted about today, want to reach out to you and ask you or see the content that you put out there, where could people find you or reach out to you?
Right. So my website's easiest, joshstrength.com. Um on Instagram, it's at Jailhouse Strong. On Facebook, at the Josh Strength Method. On X, it's Josh Strength. I don't think I really do any other sites besides those. So yeah.
No worries. Well, no, thanks a lot for taking the time to jump on. I thought there was some really, really good content in there for people to apply to their own training and think about. Thanks a lot to everyone listening, and I will see you all next
All right,
week.
Stephen, I appreciate you, brother. Thank you.